If you have ever been in a situation where you were wronged, bullied, belittled, or treated unfairly, and you froze, unable to find the words to defend yourself, if you have ever felt the shame of your own silence and replayed the encounter in your mind, wishing you had been stronger, this message is for you. There is an ancient story that reframes that silence, suggesting it is not always a failure, but can be an unconscious act of profound spiritual significance with consequences you cannot possibly imagine. We live in an age that worships the retort. Our heroes are the ones with the quickest wit, the sharpest comeback, the most eloquent clapback. We are taught from a young age that to be silent in the face of injustice is to be complicit, to be weak, to be a victim in the most pejorative sense of the word. And so, when it happens, when the shock of a cruel word or a callous act short-circuits our brain and steals our voice, the shame that follows can be more painful than the initial offense. We berate ourselves in the quiet of the night. Why didn't I say something? Why did I just stand there? What is wrong with me? We feel we have failed a fundamental test of character. But what if this modern script is incomplete? What if it overlooks a deeper, more mysterious layer of reality? The Sufi masters, those profound psychologists of the soul, understood that human interaction is governed by more than just social dynamics. It is governed by a spiritual physics, a set of cosmic laws as real and as unforgiving as gravity. They knew that in the drama of the oppressor and the oppressed, the response of the one who was wronged is of paramount importance. And they knew that sometimes the most devastatingly powerful response is no response at all. The story that comes to us is not a complex theological treatise, but a simple, almost primal scene from the childhood of the great 18th century Ottoman sage Ibrahim Hakkı of Erzurum. It is a story about a clay jug, a cruel man on a horse, and a terrifying lesson in cosmic justice. It is an invitation to look back at your own moments of frozen silence, not with shame, but with a new and unsettling sense of awe. It is a reassurance that your inability to speak may not have been a failure of your voice, but an activation of a much, much older and more powerful one. Our story begins with an act of humble service. The young Ibrahim Hakkı was a student under the tutelage of a great spiritual guide, Ismail Fakirullah. One day, his master handed him an empty clay water jug and sent him on a simple errand, to fetch water from the local spring. It was a mundane task, a daily ritual. But on this day, the ritual was to be interrupted by a lesson in the nature of pure, unadulterated injustice. As the boy was carefully filling the jug at the fountain, a horseman approached. He was a man of some standing, radiating an aura of arrogance and impatience. Seeing the child in his way, he did not ask him to move. He commanded it with a snarl. "Get out of the way, boy," he barked. A tremor of fear went through the young Ibrahim Hakkı. He was small, and the man and his horse were large and menacing. He quickly grabbed his half-filled jug and tried to scurry aside. But the man was not content with mere obedience. He seemed to relish the boy's fear. It was a kind of sport for him. He nudged his horse forward, cornering the child, enjoying the spectacle of his terror. In his panic, trying to escape the horse's looming presence, the boy dropped the precious clay jug. Before he could retrieve it, the horse stamped its heavy hoof down and the jug shattered into 100 pieces on the stone ground. The sound of the breaking clay was the sound of the boy's world shattering. It was not just a jug, it was his master's trust, his responsibility, a symbol of his simple, orderly life, now destroyed for no reason at all, for a moment of a powerful man's cruel amusement. Tears streaming down his face, the boy turned and fled, leaving the man, perhaps with a smirk on his face, behind him. He ran back to his master's lodge, sobbing, his heart pounding with fear and the shame of his failure. His teacher, Ismail Fakirullah, saw him, and asked gently, "What is it, my son? Why are you weeping?" Through his tears, the boy recounted the story, the intimidating horseman, the fear, the chase, the shattered jug. The master listened intently, his expression unreadable. When the boy was finished, his teacher asked a very specific and crucial question. "Did you say anything to the man who broke your jug?" "No, master," Ibrahim Hakkı whispered. "I was too afraid. I couldn't say a single word." The master's response was not what the boy expected. It was not comfort, it was not reassurance. It was a strange and urgent command. "Go back to the spring at once," he said, his voice firm. "Find that man and say to him, 'Why did you break my jug, you cruel man?' Go now." The boy was terrified. The thought of confronting the man who had just traumatized him was overwhelming. But he was more afraid of disobeying his master than he was of the bully. He walked back towards the spring, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw the horseman from a distance, still lingering by the water. He tried to summon the courage to approach him, to speak the words his master had given him, but his body would not obey. The fear was a physical thing, a paralysis that rooted him to the spot. He couldn't do it. Defeated, he turned and went back to his teacher. "Master, I am sorry," he said, his head bowed in shame. "I could not bring myself to say anything to him. I was too afraid." Now the master's demeanor changed. The calm firmness was replaced by a startling, almost frightening intensity. "Go back," he commanded, his voice sharp with an urgency the boy had never heard before. "Go back before that man leaves the spring and say something to him, anything. If you do not, it will be far, far worse." The sheer force of his master's will propelled the boy forward. He understood now that this was not a simple test of courage. Something else was at stake, something he could not comprehend. He gathered every ounce of his resolve. He would force the words out. He would obey. He ran back toward the spring, his master's warning echoing in his ears. But when he arrived, the scene had changed. A small crowd was gathering. The horseman was no longer on his horse. He was on the ground, lying in a heap in the stone basin of the spring, his body broken and still. His horse, a creature known for its placid nature, stood nearby, trembling. The onlookers explained what had happened. In a sudden, inexplicable frenzy, the horse had reared up and kicked its master with a brutal force, throwing him into the stone basin and killing him instantly. A cold dread, far deeper than his earlier fear, washed over the young Ibrahim Hakkı. He ran back to his master, his mind reeling, and told him what he had seen. Ismail Fakirullah's face was not triumphant. It was filled with a profound sadness, a heavy sorrow. He looked at his terrified student and finally explained the hidden spiritual physics of what had just transpired. "That man," the master began, his voice low and solemn, "committed an act of pure oppression against you. He terrified you and destroyed your property for no reason. In that moment, you became the purely oppressed. And you, in your terror, said nothing. You did not offer a single word of protest. You did not even have the capacity to be angry. Your silence was not a choice. It was a state of being. And in that state of pure, undefended victimhood, you did not file your complaint with the court of human affairs. You unconsciously, automatically appealed your case directly to God." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "There is a cosmic law," he continued. "When an act of oppression is so absolute, and the response of the oppressed is so completely powerless, it touches upon what we call the divine zeal, or the protective jealousy of God. It is like a body's immune system. A small cut, the body can handle locally, but a deep, clean wound, an invasion of a foreign body, triggers a massive systemic response. Your silence was that deep, clean wound in the fabric of justice. It triggered an immediate and overwhelming response from the universe itself. The divine court does not operate on human timelines. Its sentences are swift and severe, and the payment it exacted was his life. Then came the most chilling part of the lesson. "That is why I sent you back," the master said, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Had you gone back and said even one sentence to him, 'Why did you do that, you cruel man?' you would have settled the score between you. It would have become a human affair, an exchange of energies. He would have committed an injustice, and you would have made your accusation. The scales would have been balanced, however imperfectly, on the human plane. You would have been quits. But because you remained silent, because your fear made you utterly and completely helpless, the full, terrifying weight of the divine law fell upon him. Your silence made you a perfect victim, and a perfect victim is something the universe cannot abide for long. I was trying to save him from his fate." This story is a profound reframing of our modern understanding of power, victimhood, and justice. Let's connect it directly to the shame we often feel. The freeze response is a well-documented psychological and physiological phenomenon. When faced with an overwhelming threat, our nervous system can short-circuit the fight or flight options and choose to freeze. It's an involuntary state of paralysis. We feel shame for this, judging it as cowardice. We see it as a personal failing. This Sufi story takes that biological reality and gives it a spiritual dimension. It suggests that this involuntary state of freeze is not a character flaw, but a specific spiritual status. In that moment of paralysis, you are stripped of your ego, your social conditioning, your learned responses. You are reduced to a state of pure, raw being. And in that state of pure, undefended victimhood, you did not file your complaint with the Court of Human Affairs. You unconsciously, automatically appealed your case directly to God.
The shame we feel is a modern psychological overlay on a deep, ancient spiritual event. We are ashamed because our culture tells us our value is in our agency, our voice, our power to resist. The ancient wisdom suggests that there are moments when our utter lack of agency is precisely what connects us to the ultimate agency of the cosmos. This is not an encouragement to be a passive victim. It is not a strategy. The master wanted the boy to speak. The human court, with all its imperfections, is almost always preferable. It allows for learning, for repentance, for reconciliation. The divine court is final. This story is a diagnosis, not a prescription. It is an explanation of what might be happening when we find ourselves in that state of frozen silence against our will. It is a reassurance that our powerlessness is seen by a power that is anything but. Let us bring this difficult and profound wisdom into a moment of quiet contemplation, a moment to re-examine our own history with this feeling. Find a still and quiet place. Close your eyes. Take a long, slow breath in, and as you exhale, let go of the modern world's demand that you always be strong, always have an answer. Bring to mind a time when you were wronged and you froze. A time a boss belittled you in a meeting. A partner said something deeply cruel. A stranger was aggressive, or you were bullied as a child. Choose a memory where your response was silence, a silence that later brought you shame. Do not relive the trauma. Observe it as if you were watching a scene from a movie. See your younger self standing there, silent. Feel the echo of the shame, the frustration, the self-recrimination that you have carried with you since that day. Acknowledge it. It is a heavy burden. Now, I want you to look at that silent figure of yourself not with judgment, but with the eyes of the master Ismail Fakirullah. See that your silence was not cowardice. It was the freeze response. It was your nervous system, overwhelmed, protecting you in the only way it knew how. Forgive yourself for not being a hero in that moment. You were a human being in a state of shock. Now, let's take it a step deeper. I want you to entertain the possibility, just for this moment, that your silence was not an empty void. Imagine that your silence was a statement, a silent, desperate, and unintentional appeal. You were not able to file a complaint with the Human Resources Department of the universe, so your soul, in its terror, bypassed that office and sent the file directly to the CEO. You were not wishing for the downfall of your oppressor. That is not the point. The point is to release your own burden. The point is to understand that you did not carry that injustice alone. In your powerlessness, a great power was made aware of the imbalance. Visualize yourself handing over the file of that painful memory. Give it to the universe, to God, to the great law of cause and effect. It is no longer your job to prosecute the case in the middle of the night. You have been heard. The record has been received. Take one more deep breath, and as you exhale, let go of the shame of that silence. Replace it with a sense of quiet awe. Your being, in its most vulnerable state, participated in a profound and mysterious cosmic drama. You can let it go now. The court is in session.
The ultimate reassurance of this story is not that our enemies will be punished. The true reassurance is that our deepest moments of vulnerability are not moments of abandonment. We are never truly defenseless. When our own voice fails us, when our courage deserts us, when we are left alone and trembling in the face of cruelty, it is precisely then that we are least alone. The universe is not a chaotic, meaningless void. It is a finely tuned moral instrument. It has a profound and vested interest in justice. And when an act of oppression is so pure that it silences the victim completely, the sound of that silence, the story tells us, is the loudest and most terrible sound in the cosmos. It rings a bell that awakens a justice that never sleeps. Your shame is misplaced. It should be replaced by a profound understanding that you are part of a system of justice so vast, so precise, and so powerful that no broken jug and no broken heart ever truly goes unnoticed. The story of the broken jug does not end with the death of the horseman. In fact, that is merely the thunderclap that announces the arrival of a much deeper and more difficult wisdom. To leave the story there is to be left with a sense of terrifying, almost magical retribution. But the purpose of these teachings is not to reveal a universe of vengeance, but one of profound and intricate balance. It is to equip us as modern people to navigate the complex dynamics of cruelty and injustice, not just with resilience, but with a transformative understanding. Let us now step beyond the initial shock of the story and explore the inner landscape it reveals, the psychology of the oppressor, the dangerous allure of victimhood, and the true path to a strength that transcends both roles entirely. The story's first, and perhaps most uncomfortable mirror, is the one it holds up to the soul of the oppressor. The horseman is not a distant, monstrous villain. He is a modern archetype. He is the executive who belittles a subordinate in a meeting for a momentary feeling of power. He is the anonymous commenter online who unleashes a torrent of cruelty to alleviate their own inner emptiness. He is the person in traffic who leans on the horn, filled with a rage that has nothing to do with the person in front of them. He is the embodiment of the devouring ego, the conditioned self, or nefs,
in its most desperate state. Sufi psychology teaches that such acts of casual cruelty do not spring from a place of strength, but from a place of profound inner poverty. The oppressor is a soul in a state of famine. They are starved of a sense of their own intrinsic worth, and so they seek to fill the gnawing void within by siphoning worth from others. By making the boy feel small, the horseman, for a fleeting moment, feels big. By making the child feel powerless, he experiences a phantom sensation of power. It is a spiritual vampirism. He is not just breaking a clay jug, he is trying to crack the vessel of another spirit to get a single, unsatisfying drop of the validation he cannot generate for himself. This is why the master, Ismail Fakirullah, felt not triumph, but a deep and profound sorrow at the horseman's death. He did not see the death of a villain. He saw the tragic, self-inflicted end of a deeply sick and suffering soul. His urgent desire to have the boy speak was an act of medicine. He was trying to administer an antidote, a small, human-level consequence that could have potentially shocked the man out of his spiritual disease. A simple, direct confrontation, "Why did you do that?" might have pierced the bubble of his ego and forced a moment of self-reflection. It would have been a bitter pill, but it might have saved his life. The master's compassion extended even, and perhaps especially, to the oppressor, for he saw the man not as an evil force, but as a prisoner of his own inner darkness. This leads us to the most dangerous and easily misinterpreted aspect of this teaching: the temptation to weaponize victimhood. Upon hearing this story, a part of our ego might whisper, "Ah, so the secret is to be a pure victim. If I remain utterly silent and passive, the universe will destroy my enemies for me." This is a profound and perilous misunderstanding. It is taking a descriptive law of spiritual physics and trying to turn it into a prescriptive strategy for revenge. This is the very definition of what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche called ressentiment, the vengeful, impotent rage of the weak, disguised as moral superiority. The state of the young Ibrahim Hakkı was powerful precisely because it was not a strategy. It was authentic. His silence was born of pure, unadulterated fear, not of cunning design. He had no egoic investment in the outcome. He simply wanted to escape. The moment one chooses to be a silent victim in order to trigger a cosmic punishment, the purity of the state is corrupted. The silence is no longer a sincere expression of powerlessness. It is a calculated act of aggression. The case is no longer appealed to the divine court of absolute justice. It is now being tried in the corrupt, ego-driven court of human vengeance. You have, in that moment, picked up a weapon. And the moment you pick up a weapon, you are no longer the purely oppressed. You have entered the fray, and you are now subject to the messy, unpredictable rules of human conflict. The master's wisdom is a warning, not a manual for cosmic warfare.